sisters in Indonesia, and good afternoon for those who are following us from Nairobi and some parts of Africa, and greetings to all our listeners on YouTube. So this is the second recap before the global closing ceremony of this 3-day session or conference on Fratelli Tutti. So I'd like to welcome the representative from the Hub of the Americas to give us a summary of what happened during their second day workshop.
Start with Indonesia.
Oh, we start with Indonesia. Indonesia. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
On behalf, is it we win?
Yeah. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Good afternoon in Africa, in Nairobi. Good morning in America, and good evening in Indonesia. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to give a report from Southeast Asia Hub. Here we have also my friend Ahmad Nurdani, and then also Egi and Coco, who maybe later, if there is a question, they also can answer the question. I would like to share my screen. May I? Hold on a second. Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. Okay, this afternoon here in Indonesia, we already did the workshop, entitled Maintaining Human Solidarity in the Post-Pandemic Era. The objective to maintain the solidarity among various religions and faiths communities in the post-pandemic era. The participants who joined via Zoom online conference meeting, around 60 to 70 participants, and also more than 250 viewers joined on YouTube. We had two speakers. The first speaker is Associate Professor Zulfikar Amir. He's Social Resilience Lab and also lecturer at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. There are 3 key points of his presentation. The first one is he said that in the social and medical intervention, the contact tracing is very crucial. That is why his presentation entitled "Contact Tracing as a Social Practice: The Role of Human Solidarity in Pandemic Resilience." Social tracing is a social practice that influenced by social conditions, including public trust, social capital, risk perception, legitimate authority, and technological infrastructure. Community-based surveillance involving families and local communities. His research found that more women actually are willing to be tested and traced on the voluntary basis. You can see his conclusion is very interesting. The conclusion is that contact tracing is a social practice to curb disease outbreak. It embodies knowledge, everyday relation, and social institution. Success of tracing depends on certain social conditions, as I mentioned earlier, that allow early detection and isolation to be carried out effectively. The contact tracing is fundamental to enhance pandemic resilience, especially in multiple waves outbreak. It is part of social endurance. Contact tracing also should be considered as a collective responsibility where the government and civil society actively collaborate. And the last conclusion is human solidarity allows communities to build pandemic's resilience at the grassroots level. The speaker was Dr. Sukri Langkute. He is the Deputy Director for International Relations of Fratelli University in Pattani, Thailand. Fratelli University. So there are some key points from his presentation. Langkute state that each mankind is born as the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. Human nowadays also learn about the religious values of humanity, brotherhood, and sisterhood, and virtue. He promotes the 5 principles and 3 strategy, SON, S-O-N, of human solidarity. The first one is self-strategy, which is head, hand, and heart. It means that solidarity should come from the heart, and also how to action in the solidarity need to be thinking first, and then also the most important is also the action itself. And the second is organizational strategy. The pyramid and the kiblat, the pyramid, which is the strategy that also see who is the leadership in the organization, and the kibla is actually not only see the leadership or the leader, but also all people who involved in the organization or the community. And the third one is networking strategy. It show the dynamic and balance the communication between common inside and outside into the insider and outsider. And also Langkute describe challenges and opportunities of human solidarity in the pandemic. Even now we are still in the pandemic era, not yet post, but we try to see this for the future. I have, for example, in Indonesia, by next year we will get herd immunity. Yeah, we hope. And then there are 2 discussants who invited in the third workshop. The first one is Albertus Bagus Laksana, PhD, is a pastor at the Sanata Dharma Catholic University. He highlights the importance of social covenant in building solidarity after pandemic. I would like to quote his statement that social covenant based on the long experience of suffering and struggle and solidarity during the pandemic. He also mentioned about the values of self-isolation during the pandemic as a Sabbath to strengthen the spirituality and passion oneself. The second discussion is Dr. Nur Sudiati. She is the Institute of the Indonesian Institute of the Art of Jakarta, but also she is the interfaith woman activist, including in my community. She's very active in interfaith dialogue action. She emphasizes the significance of local wisdom in building human solidarity during the pandemic. Solidarity among people without solidarity between each mankind and between the creation to its creator. She also mentioned that the human solidarity is effectively starts from the family bond. And I would like to also mention some keywords from Q&A session. There is one good tradition in Indonesian society we call royong. Royong means togetherness and cooperation among people in the community. So gotong royong, a social capital, plays an important role in disaster resilience. Nowadays, before and actually moreover after pandemic, this gotong royong tradition become more strengthened in our society, even though even though at some areas, gotong royong also, you know, think the challenge, yeah, and the pandemic can ruin our lives, but keep the spiritual life and mental health. And also, there is one very nice quote from the discussion that do not forget to care to ourselves. So if we talk about solidarity, about human solidarity, we also not only to think and to concern to other people in this situation, in this pandemic, but also we need to take care of ourselves. And the last one, we talk about, we connected to our topic about Fratelli, Tutti, or Ukhuwah Insania. This declaration is all about human solidarity. So in this third workshop, we got some very important point related to Fratelli, Tutti, or Ukhuwah Insania. That to protect the human solidarity is a means to protect each other. So the contract tracing that I mentioned, that the first speaker mentioned, and also he did research on this topic, is an effort to protect each other in the society, especially in the family and the community. That's based on religion beliefs as well as local tradition or local wisdom. And the social covenant is based on spirituality and transformation. And the last one is useful faith, is when we have dialogue and encounter. So this all the key points, and also some lesson that we can learn from, and we are very happy that the diversity of our not only speaker and moderator, but also participant. So I forgot that our moderator is the Reverend Joseph Hanusa. He's the lecturer and the priest from Duta Wacana Christian University. So the speaker already come from different tradition, and also we have some Buddhist and Hindus participant, as well as a local beliefs participant in the third workshop. Thank you so much, and that's from our hub, and we again thank you for this great opportunity and cooperation between different hub. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Vivian, for this presentation, and I would like to appreciate the diversity of the speakers, one from Singapore. I would like also to appreciate the ecumenical aspect of it with the moderator, Reverend Father, I cannot remember the name, and then the pastor was with you, and the interreligious nature of your session, because you had also the Hindus and the Buddhists among the participants and among the viewers. This is all what Fratelli Tutti is all about, inclusivity, even at the level of religious participation and so on. So the floor is to all the participants here, if they need to ask some few questions before we pass to the next hub. Welcome. Whoever is ready can unmute. I see Marita ready with a question on the lips.
Well, actually, it is to commend you, Win-Win, for you and your colleagues, Ahmad and your other colleagues here who I know less well, for all the work that you did to integrate your programs religiously and also gender-wise, and to emphasize that social contract if coming from the, in the context of the local wisdom as well as the religious and ancestral wisdom of the different religious and cultural traditions. It was so rich. Thank you.
Welcome, Marita.
You're welcome.
Gerald.
I'm going to ask Marita if she would pull up the summary of Judy Clarence, because I don't have it on my computer. Would you like me to start on the US Hub now?
Or is there
No.
any questions so far before we pass to the?
I think I'll pass and let anybody else that has any questions.
Okay, fine, yeah. Good. Father Abraham.
Mine is not a question, but kind of to applaud you, especially your sense of unity or synchronization, because we can call that I really like, and especially as a kind of towards the summary of your side. Human solidarity is impossible without solidarity with God. In a sense, without proper relationship with God, who demands us the unity of humanity, we have no motivation. So really, you did a great job, and I like that perspective, because for me it is the essential. Thank you.
And the pages, didn't you?
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you again.
Oh, I can bring it up on the screen. Okay.
Ahmad, would you want to add something?
Okay, thank you, Father Innocent. Maybe I want to add something. It is about why do we choose this workshop, and add some word into the after Fratelli. We add some word with the Ukhuwah Insaniya after the Fratelli, because when I was joining this committee, I don't even know what is the meaning of Fratelli, and I think in our country the word Fratelli is not so familiar. So we try to make it easier to be understood by our country, by our citizens, so that we add some word with the Ukhuwah Insaniya that I think the same between Fratelli and Ukhuwah Islamiyah has a similar meaning. So for easy understanding by the audience and by the reader and by our citizen, so we add this word with Global Conference on Fratelli, which means that Fratelli is the same meaning with Ukhuwah Insaniya. This is brotherhood, sisterhood, and human solidarity, and so on. I think we try to add this to make it easy to be understood by our citizen, by our reader, and by our audience. This is from me. Thank you.
Yeah, this is exactly what Marita was commending you, because you have really translated the concept into the local language, which is so rich. I mean, it's so rich. That's really very, very commendable. In Christian tradition, we call it inculturation, really. Yeah, so that's really very, very nice, and we really appreciate your effort to make the whole concept understood by within the context of Southeast Asia. I suppose Wasania maybe might also mean more or less the same thing in the region. Thank you very much. And we go to your the other colleague from Indonesia. I just see the Southeast Asia hub. Okay. Taufik.
Is it me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to add something, Egi?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's not one of the steering committee of this insightful conference, to be true. But yes, yeah, I'm one of the, you can say, an active participant. and one that be grateful to be present at this conference. So yeah, I would like to give some comment on this conference. May I? I think.
Yes, you may. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. In my opinion, I would like to say that this is one of the most insightful and illuminating discussion and then dialogues in my life, and that yeah, this conference is so rich. It contains some specific subjects about citizenship, about family resilience, about coping mechanism, and about human solidarity, of course. And to sum up, I would like to say that in my religion, I mean Islam, the encyclical letter of Fratelli Tutti is truly in line with the closing praise of the Quranic verse in chapter number 49, verse number 13. It is Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. So I would like to say that the meaning of taqwa in our belief that it may also be interpreted as human, not only in the personal matter of spirituality, but also in social aspects, like I said before. So yeah, thank you very much for all the committee of this event.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And would like really to commend the effort done by our partners at the State Islamic University, Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, for the effort you've done. And we were just discussing this morning, the first day we had the first meeting with Vivian and Ahmad. You just entered into the spirit of Fratelli Tutti. And when you came back, you had the whole program. It was really so wonderful and so beautiful. And we are pleased to see that you have also made a first step to request a partnership with IRDIS through a memorandum of understanding, MOU, between Tangaza and the university. We shall respond to your request as soon as possible. That is the fruit of this global fraternity. So welcome. Thank you very much. Good. So we can now pass to the Americas Hub, and then whoever is ready, either Marita or Gerard, you're welcome.
Maybe, Hudai, if you could put up the morning session as Jerry reads the summary for that.
Our morning session, the first session was moderated by Father Augustine Pamplani. You can see him on the left there. And his team, his team are members of the Institute of Science and Religion in various parts of India. So the first presentation, we had 3 presentations, one from India, the second from the US, and the third, of course, from Africa with Hudai. So the first speaker was Ramesh Bijani, who's associated with the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Delhi, India. And he spoke about the corona pandemic in relationship to the nation and soul of India. He researches the links between religion and medicine, studying the spiritual aspects of medicine. He said, Indian people have a saying, the world is a family. He asked, does a nation have a soul? If we think of the world as a goddess, Gaia, for example, a nation has a distinct personality related to its culture. So yes, it has a soul. India's culture is defined by spirituality. That's the master key to the Indian mind. Thus, all events are an expression of the divine will, which works only for the best. Difficulties in life are gifts given for a purpose, to help us to grow individually. All events, positive or negative, give us an opportunity to embrace spiritual growth. While the West reacts to the pandemic with a rational mind, producing fear and pandemic, India meets it spiritually, protected by faith, a feeling that all will be well, and that perhaps COVID is a punishment for all our collective sins. This spiritual approach leads to greater peace of mind, which strengthens the immune system. Panic, stress, and fear weaken it, protecting us from COVID. This is reflected by a much smaller caseload per capita in India than in the US or the UK. Science supports this theory. Meditation reduces stress, and a study showed that the antibody levels in India improved immediately when test subjects watched a certain contemplative video about Mother Teresa. The pandemic has been a humbling experience all over the world, one that reminds us to re-examine our priorities. Pre-COVID life was fast-paced with lots of travel, fast food, separation of families. In contrast, during COVID, things have slowed down. People are eating more healthily. Families spend more time together. In place of planning comes a sense of relating into uncertainty. It's led to a revolution in education. Kids are now free to learn what they want to learn instead of following a strict curriculum. Now, for all of us, there's a greater sense of one world. We're all in this together. The second speaker is a Jesuit, Father Job Kozentatam, and his talk was on the science-religion dialogue in regard to what was the origin of the coronavirus pandemic. He discussed the various theories related to the lab leak theory. I won't go into all the details of that, but that has been one of the theories, that the lab in Wuhan was the source of the pandemic. But the Chinese official view is that the virus originated in the US at Fort Detrick in Maryland, and that infected the people and carried it to China. But the role of Pope Francis he said is not happy with how the pandemic has been handled. Rich nations are embroiled in controversy over the inconvenience of mask wearing and restrictions on personal freedom, while people in poor countries experience illness, death, and ill effects in all aspects of their lives. So because of the possibility that this could have been a leak in China, we need to enact stringent laws to keep this from happening again. Ethical and spiritual values must be put at the center of our response to the pandemic. Moral values, humanity, and humaneness. Science needs to interact with religion and collaborate and come up with a solution for these terrible pandemics. Our third speaker was Father Agustin Pamplani. He is the director of the Religion and Science Institute in Kerala, India. And he said that the pandemic has exposed cracks in society's systems and revealed the huge disparity in healthcare. India has been hit hard by COVID, and only during the second wave has aid from other countries poured in, finally reaching its rural population. Fratelli Tutti stresses the need to work together across the strata of society, but this hasn't happened in India because poor rural areas suffer from the lack of healthcare. In poor communities, social distancing is virtually impossible. Online education for children is hampered by the lack of access to computers. Displaced migrants suffer from job loss. Everything is much worse among poor people in rural areas. At the same time, there's been a 35% increase in the wealth of Indian billionaires. Additionally, gender inequality is greater in India. Fewer women than men have been vaccinated. Augustine ended with a quote from Oxfam: "Extreme inequality is not inevitable, but a policy choice." Our next speaker was Dr. Sterling Harwood, representing the Western approach. And he said the golden rule and the global right to a COVID vaccine is in most of the great spiritual and philosophical traditions of the West. Sterling began by stating that Biden is on the right track by contributing vaccines to other countries. He reminded us of the golden rule, to love your brother even when he's far away. Other religions convey similar messages. Confucianism says, what you do not want done to you, don't do to others. Plato stated, may I do to others as I would want them to do to me. In the Old Testament, in Leviticus reveal, love thy neighbor as thyself. But Immanuel Kant adds that we also have duties to ourselves. One reason to share medical resources with other countries is to help control the spread. If we'd helped India earlier, for example, the Delta variant might not have developed. Kant's view centers more on self. Hinduism is more selfless. A podcast by Michael Osterholm provided an excellent source of statistics for the COVID pandemic, in which we saw how the pandemic has coursed throughout the world and everybody's affected by it. Jerry Grudson noted that the US has the highest number of cases in the world right now, even though we have full access to the vaccine, due to the politicization of mask wearing and vaccinations. Often Trump supporters refuse both. He also mentioned the role of social media in the US, promoting disinformation and anti-science, and asked if this is a worldwide problem. There followed a general discussion about the spread of the virus and mandate, politicization, political influence, rising cases despite vaccination. Our final speaker was Hudaya Kar, A Path to Human Solidarity, a case study of the COVID-19 pandemic and the way forward. Speaking from Kenya, he began with the prayer of Jonah when he was in the belly of the whale. There is no God other than you. I was among the many wrongdoers. We've been eaten by the climate crisis and COVID, just as Jonah was consumed by the whale. Vaccine nationalism, a zero-sum game, is a sad scenario because we cannot be saved alone, but we're all trying to be saved alone. Africa has received only a tiny percentage of the available vaccine doses. We've utterly failed the test of international collaboration. There are all sorts of explanations: power struggles, the threat of the other, cultural humiliation, globalization, exploitation of the poor by the rich, that every nation must have its own. We failed the last 2 centuries, and not just because of COVID. Fratelli Tutti shows us that we need to acknowledge the dignity of each human being. It has brought humanity back to our lives. The Islamic scholar Saeed Nursi outlines the negative principles of modern culture. Its point of support is force. Its aim and goal is benefit. Its principle is conflict. The bond between the masses is racialism and negativity. Its incitement is inciting lust, passion, and gratifying the desires. In contrast, the golden rule supports these principles. Its point of support is truth. Its goal is virtue. Its means of unity are the ties of religion, country, and class. It promotes mutual assistance and encourages guidance. What does the future hold? We need to break the cycle of hatred and establish hope as a culture. Hudai cited the parable of the Good Samaritan, which character is the parable, which is the parable are we. Pope Francis tells us dreams are built together. And Matthew 5:9 reminds us, blessed are the peacemakers, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So I'll turn it over to Marita now for the next, unless you want to take questions.
Why don't I go ahead and finish the Hub of the Americas report, and then we could open it to questions, if that's agreeable.
That's fine, Marita.
Okay, I'm going to ask Hudai, if possible, if he would show the panelist for this next report that I'm doing on Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. I served as the moderator for that workshop, and it became clear to me that we were in a rare moment where potentially hundreds of us were watching this live, And we all have a spiritual capacity to bless our world. And we are all spiritual beings, regardless if we are members of a religious body or are humanist. And so we began by taking a half minute to enter into ourselves, unite, and pray for those who are suffering at this time, or deepen our own commitment to respond to them, whatever form our prayer took. Then I gave a brief introduction, beginning with the IPCC report that was given, that's the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, which published 10 days ago its 10-year plan. It's a 3,500-page report, and it was given to the Secretary General, whose summary comment was, "This is a code red for humanity." So beginning with this awareness of a flashing red light, we held the question, how can we respond to this enormous threat? And it calls for an ecological conversion and a capacity to live more simply and to share our resources more generously, all of us together. This workshop was designed as an initiative coming out of Fratelli, Tutti. Pope Francis's second encyclical, which was Laudato Si, stressed over and over again how we and our actions are all interconnected with the larger world. And so the intention of this the intention of this workshop was initiated by the third encyclical, which is asking us to encounter one another and to be able to hear not only the cry of the earth, but also the cry of the poor. So we had panelists representing many different parts of the world. The first panelist was Liam O'Callaghan, who has served as a Columban missionary for over 20 years in Pakistan. And he brought us awarenesses of two things. I'll go ahead.
Go ahead, Marita. Go ahead.
Okay. He said at the time that Laudato Si came out in 2015, there actually were several other religions who were coming to this, religious leaders who were coming to a similar spiritual awareness in Islam, in Buddhism, in Judaism, of this, this need to honor God's creation and to repent of our excesses. The second thing that he brought out was how Pakistan is the fifth country at risk in the second awareness that Liam O'Callaghan brought to us was the high risk, namely that Pakistan is the fifth country most at risk to the environment. And that was based on an evaluation by German Watch, who studies the risk for different parts of the world, and pointed out that that Pakistan had 152 severe environmental threats, and high flooding the temperatures reaching as high as 50 degrees centigrade, many people not being able to withstand that high degree of temperature, extreme flooding. And he showed us pictures of people in the suffering in this way. And then he went on to talk about the interfaith collaborative that he has established there in Pakistan called Friends of the Earth, working with the youth and bringing together representatives of Islam and the minority religions there, his own Catholicism and Hinduism. And so he is hopeful. And let me just say here, he emphasized as a recommendation coming out of our conference that we do whatever we can as interfaith bodies to support the COP26 meeting in October by the United Nations based on this high threat that we have with the environment. The second speaker was Nicole Insuasti, who is a leader and activist in Ecuador. And she has worked with indigenous people in rural Ecuador for their water rights. And she was able to join an NGO at the United Nations, specifically the Council on Economic and Social Well-being. And in that context, presented 3 5-minute videos to that United Nations council, I should say, pointing out several things. First of all, the way the human rights are being violated in the indigenous communities by agribusiness that does not allow them to have sufficient water for their growing. And some of them migrate to the cities. And the second video demonstrated the vulnerability they have in Quito, Ecuador, especially the women and the youth. The youth are taken advantage of in terms of the work, the work environment, and the thing that she pointed to most is the threat of losing their culture. And she said in the city, and she said that language is the key to their identity and their culture. And their community is working hard to keep alive the language, the traditions, the legends of their Quechua culture. And it made me more aware, and maybe all of us that were watching, how critical it is to preserve the language of the immigrant populations in our different countries, how that ties them to their memory, to their land, to their culture. The next representative was from Brazil. Joanne Blaney is a Maryknoll missioner who has worked with marginalized communities in Brazil for the last 25 years. She pointed out that in Fratelli, Tutti, Pope Francis reminds us of the universal fraternity, a world where there is no other, no them, there is only us, the earth and its people. She reflected upon Fratelli Tutti's message in the light of the dramatic increases in the destruction of the Amazon, the invasions of indigenous territory, the illegal mining and logging, as well as the increased urban violence, the mass incarceration and levels of poverty. She posed the question, how can we work together to bring gospel values and a cosmovision of interconnectedness and inclusion to a reality of such injustice, marginalization, and exploitation? In sharing her response in Sao Paulo, she described experiences of working with people of all faiths and spiritualities, building a culture of encounter and engaging in collective processes of listening and dialogue that bring healing, that create community, that transcend divisions, and build solidarity and responsibility. And what she has done is take this model of restorative justice, which creates these circles where people hear from each other, both those who have been victimized and those who have created crimes. And they are within a circle. And while the goal is not reconciliation, the goal is listening and understanding to whatever extent is possible the situation and the words of the others. The goal is to build a participatory model of inclusion, and that phrase is from Fratelli, Tutti, that mobilizes groups to actively engage in working to change unjust structures and build a more just and nonviolent global community. She and her team there work with the homeless. They visit the prisons. She showed us pictures of the prisons, the overcrowding. It's just the youth that are in prison. It's just, all of it is really heartbreaking. And finally, our last speaker, who we see there at the end, is our final speaker is Iona Connor, who lives here in the United States and is the founder and director of the Grassroots Coalition for Environmental and Economic Justice. Several of the participants in this coalition, which she formed 13 years ago, are youth from different parts of Africa, specifically Cameroon, Mali, Zimbabwe, and they are doing amazing projects, which often are written up in the journal, of which she is the founder and publisher, which is entitled Groundswell News Journal. And I want to point out in concluding here that that journal has an excellent breakdown of the IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that just came out 10 days ago. And in my report, I have the website where you can go to that news journal. So that was our panel. We saw the faces, we heard the stories from very different parts of the world, 3 different continents of the poor. And the great question that I have for our way forward is, how are we able to bring us together as a world community? How can we become more conscious and more united with the suffering people of our world? That's the end of my report.
Thank you very much, Marita and Gerard, for this comprehensive report from the rich discussion in your 2 panels in the Hub of the Americas, where you were looking at science and religion, and also the cry of the earth, the cry of the poor, in reference also to Laudato Si. And I would like also to commend your crossing the borders of the Americas and bringing in panelists from Africa, from India, from Pakistan, from
Brazil.
Tutti. So I would like to give the panelists here, those are present, if they would like to comment on. So I see Father Abraham would like to start with the, yeah.
Thank you, Father Innocent. First of all, I congratulate you, although because of the time I couldn't watch most of it, but on the first day I watched it fully. And also now with your recap, I could really follow how serious you are, and you have addressed very urgent issues, especially for the first day. I said, I think they got the point of Fratelli Tutti because they were really contextualizing to the situation of US or Americas, in particular the immigration issue, the issue of racism, the issue of now of coronavirus. I really commend you, I congratulate you, you have taught us a lot. Only I have one question. If you have been like that addressing, if you had maybe addressed or considered the difference the good governance can do in protecting, let us say, coronavirus pandemic, or if you could also say the consequences of bad governance, how it could affect. I think you have both differences in your Northern Americas. So maybe if I can bring it to consideration.
So that's an issue of good governance and its impact, or bad governance and its consequences, as far as the pandemic, coronavirus pandemic is concerned. So back to you, the Americas.
I'd like to just mention that the problem of governance has been very much a problem with the coronavirus, because some states in the United States don't have very good policies on how to control the pandemic. They have not encouraged vaccination to the level where it is in other states. Also, some of the governors in some of the southern states have restricted the use of mandates to wear masks for schools, for example. So there's a big disparity between some of the, we call them blue states and red states. And this has led to big disparities in how the coronavirus has been controlled. So it's a big problem in the United States because each state has its own policies. We're a big country with 350 million people. So the California, for example, has a much lower coronavirus rate than, say, Alabama. Alabama has a terrible problem right now. They don't have enough ICU beds to care for all the people that have gotten coronavirus, because the number of unvaccinated is way up there. People are suspicious of it for different political and ideological reasons or cultural reasons. So we have these disparities even within our own country about how many people are getting the treatments for the coronavirus, like the vaccine, and even access to medical care is uneven, depending on what state you're in. Rita, do you want to comment any further?
No, I will say that governance also has affected our U.S. response to the environmental crisis. And that is that our previous president withdrew from the Paris Accord. And it's only with our current President Biden that on the one hand, we re-entered the Paris Accord, and on the other that we are putting forth green legislation that will support more sustainable development. On another note, I meant to mention that our excellent librarian, Judy Clarence, has put together an annotated bibliography for this conference, and which will be available in the proceedings and is currently available on the GMU website under interfaith studies. So that's one way that we have of moving forward with all of our issues, is by educating ourselves, not only individually, but in groups. We need to form groups that are in our faith groups, in our larger circles, that are studying these issues, listening to these wonderful webinars and seminars from different parts of the world, and discussing them, discussing the challenges.
I just wanted to add this is for the way forward. GMU is promoting Fratelli Tutti as a study guide for our doctoral students. We will have a seminar on Monday evening on the conference and on Fratelli Tutti for all of the doctoral students we have in GMU. And so this is another way going forward to utilize Fratelli Tutti and the conference proceedings in your educational curriculum. If we're going to carry this forward, we need to spread the message, not just a one-time event, but making it part of the curriculum so that students and faculty incorporate these principles into their educational mission. And we're doing this in, as I said, on Monday evening, we'll have a 2-hour seminar for our students who have been watching the conference and taking notes and presenting. They will present their own analysis of the conference.
Thank you very much for that initiative, and then making it as a project of education, especially addressing the doctoral students. And we'll be glad to receive some of those so that we can also see how we can implement at our own level within our institutions. And thank you also very much for the annotated bibliography, which will be quite useful, and the issues that you have raised. Of course, they are not only within the Americas context, but they are not only for Americas, but it's a global issue. Yeah? Is governance, good or bad governance, in relation to climate change, or in, how to deal with the pandemic. This is a global issue. So we will be happy to benefit from what you have already started as a part already, as a fruit of this conference, as a way of educating ourselves and educating groups so that we can move together. So thank you very much. I don't know if there is any comment. Otherwise, we can go to the hub of Africa based in Nairobi.
May I?
Yes, yes.
Taufik, yeah.
Taufik, yeah.
Yeah, from Indonesia.
Yeah.
I would like to say my greatest thanks to the American Sub, and yeah, it was insightful about the memory of the immigrant and the destruction in Amazon and so on. But yet I have a question regarding to this matter, especially in the context of Brazil and the problem of the construction of Amazon. And yeah, my question is, may you emphasize more on the effect of landscape and climate. I mean, when there's deforestation or forest fires, for the interreligious dynamics. I think it's all. Thank you.
So you're looking at the issue of the Amazon in Brazil.
Yeah. Is there any effect from the landscape, from the problem like the construction of Amazon in Brazil with the dynamics of the interreligious community? I mean, like in Indonesia, we also have a very wide range of forests, like in Borneo. So it's like a similar case to us, and we would like to learn more about it. Yeah.
So good. Yes, Gerard.
There is a coalition developing in the Western world to protect the Amazon because it's a major source of carbon capture. And so, unfortunately, again, it's a question of good governance because the president of Brazil, Mr. Bolsonaro, has resisted allowing independent investigation. What's happening is many mining interests and various economic interests have plundered that area and it's led to deforestation and mining, and it's disrupted the ability of the Amazon to be a place where carbon can be captured because it's one of the biggest carbon capture areas of the world. So a coalition in conjunction with the United Nations and other nonprofit NGOs is trying to pressure Brazil to cease the exploitation of the Amazon. So this is a big issue in the world community. I think we all need to look at these areas of the world which are very important for the climate. And you mentioned you have some of the similar situations in Indonesia, and where we work together to protect these areas from economic interests that want to exploit them for gain. And we lose the ability for them to be places of carbon capture because these forested areas are vital for the future of humanity.
More important, I think, is the consequence on the indigenous population, which are suffering. So yes. I think that should not be forgotten.
Right. Pope Francis brought that out in the Amazon Synod, which he held in the last few years, and which they developed a whole program on this, which if you go to Amazon Synod, and he mentions the connection, cry of the earth and cry of the poor. So it isn't just the environment, it's the people that live there that are affected.
Thank you. There is a question from Hudai. Yeah.
Actually, I would like to add something to Mr. Taifik. There is a United Nations environmental program which is called Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. And it is a specialized on the Amazons in Brazil. And in 2019, they have been doing a lot. And in Africa, they also have the Green Belt Initiative. And it is also in the line with the Interfaith Dialogue. Because most of the forestries in the world belong to religious organizations. Therefore, United Nations Environmental Program, when they're creating the programs, they're working closely with the religious organizations because most of the forestries belongs to them. So right now in Brazil, there is that organization. In Africa, there is the Green Belt movement. So it is growing, and with the Laudato Si, the encyclical. Right now, there is that another initiative called Faith for Earth, based in Iceland. And with that, Muslim and other religious leaders are actively creating policy papers and also religious texts in regards to environmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that input, Hudai, so that the UNEP is working closely with religious organizations to see how to protect.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, so welcome. Thank you. Good. Allow me now. Thank you very much once again, our brothers and sisters from the Hub of the Americas, and your initiative to go across the globe and bring in speakers from all over to enrich your reflections in the Hub of the Americas. Now allow me to ask Matthias to give a presentation to what was discussed today in Nairobi. Welcome.
Thank you. I have two short points before I start. One for Taufik still to follow up. There's also the ICE network, the Interreligious Climate and Ecology Network, especially strong also in Southeast Asia. They are a group of religious leaders and scientists, so they are interconnected there. They're quite active on local level as well as on international level. Also, I wanted to mention that similar to the study guide that Professor Gerald has mentioned before, there's also a bit of good news in Kenya. The Kenyan Conference of Catholic Bishops, on the basis of this conference now, is trying to push Fratelli Tutti as a manual for grassroots activities. So it's already, with the reflection that we are giving them, it's already being pushed down. This is directly coming from Bishop Lago, who you have met in the global opening. Now, without much further ado, and fairly quickly, because I'm the last one and I'm German, so we're gonna go through our one workshop that we had today in Nairobi, which was based on the issue of inclusivity in the light of Fratelli Tutti. We had three discussants: Professor Macharia Monene from a historical perspective, and Dr. Ali Adan from a Islamic perspective, and Dr. Susan Laimaru from a gender and ethnic perspective. We have all, what happened there? Anyway, I'll do it without the presentation if that's not working. Professor Munene is a doctor of diplomatic history, has been trained in the US and in Kenya, is one of the most important political commentators in Kenya. Dr. Ali Adan is the Registrar for Research and International Networks at Umma University, the largest Muslim university in Kenya. And Dr. Susan Lamaru is the principal of the Nairobi campus of the Kenyan Methodist University. She has a doctorate in leadership and governance and is an advocate for gender mainstreaming and equality. Now, those three have come together and they have had a very similar perspective at the end of the day. So I am collecting main points regardless from where they come from, because it was then also an overlap there. So I'm trying to distill what was there. One of the main points, God is not exclusive, but religious imperialism is. And this is a red thread that has gone throughout. The problem is that God cannot be created by excluding others. Having faith does not require to exclude anyone. Quite the opposite is done by religious imperialism, and competition is ignored.
Matthias is freezing.
Was I audible for the entire time?
No.
I was.
No.
Okay. For how long was I not audible? Sorry?
God is not exclusive.
Okay, let me do that one again. God cannot be created by excluding others. Having faith does not require to exclude anyone. Religious imperialism and competition is ignoring this fact and ignoring all the lessons in the wrinkles of the story of the Good Samaritan, for example, where it doesn't matter what you believe in or where you come from, but what you do. Every human has the same right to access God, but no one is to be discriminated on the basis of being not part of the club of faith. So this is a very important observation. It's not just the faith people that can do good things. It's everybody. And everybody has the same rights in that respect. Inclusion must be active to create equal opportunities for those in need. So the subsidiarity principle of the Catholic social teaching is universal. So this type of activism and activity means that human solidarity is a strategic tool to achieve a just world. Very important. Solidarity in the light of Fratelli Tutti is not passive. It's a cry for action. It's not a cry for suffering and a cry for waiting. It's a cry for action. In that respect, Fratelli Tutti is a call to fight injustice, unsolidaric behavior, and exclusion of any group of people. A true Muslim is caring for all, and everybody is safe from him doing any harm. If you're not following that principle, that means that you're not a true Muslim. This is a pretty high bar sometimes, but I think this is worth mentioning, especially in the days of the insurgency in Afghanistan right now. If you are not providing security of doing harm to others, you're not a true Muslim. It's an important observation in that respect. Moderation and mediation are Islamic principles of inclusivity. Mercy, compassion, and not retaliation. Pope Francis then tells us to be different. We don't need to be the same. We shouldn't be the same. We should be different and diverse to build an inclusive world together. And the differences in ethnicity, which is especially important in the Kenyan situation, which was discussed at large as well, differences in ethnicity or gender must be bridged. They are not part of the positive traditions, and they are not God-given. Also an important observation, because very often the mentioning of traditions and practices is hiding the unsolidaric parts of it, is hiding the uninclusive, the exclusivity of these things. Dialogue to understand the other's suffering is key. When you understand the situation of the other, you will understand what is important and what can be done. This is true for women. This is true for different ethnicities. This is true for people with disabilities. This is true for people that are living in an area that is affected by climate change, and so on. Understanding the suffering of the other is key. And last but not least, Fratelli Tutti calls us to value each individual and their intersectional situation, the different issues that we are all faced with, the different marginalizations that we are facing. And they can overlap, and they do overlap. And this is particularly true for people in the developing world. This is particularly true for women. This is particularly true for people that are marginalized on the basis of their beliefs, gender, or ethnicity anywhere in the world. And only with that, only with this type of inclusivity, we can build the peaceful utopian society that Fratelli Tutti plans for us and plans for everybody. And in that respect, I'd like to end with a quote from Fratelli Tutti that I have also quoted in the session from paragraph 8, where Pope Francis dares us, all of God's children, to dream then as a single human family, as fellow travelers sharing the same flesh as children of the same earth, which is our common home. Each of us bringing the richness of his or her beliefs and convictions, each of us with his or her own voice. Brothers and sisters, all. That was today's session. And I hope, if there are any further questions, feel free to ask. I hope to be able to answer those. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Matthias. And I would also like to ask our viewers and listeners at this point, if they have some questions and a comment, to use the chat, and then we shall be able to address their questions and their comments as we are heading towards the conclusion of these 3 days conferences with lots of good insights. So we first address questions to Matthias, and then yeah, welcome. Or comments. Yeah.
May I?
Yes, Vivian.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Matthias, for the resume of the workshop of today in Nairobi. What you've mentioned basically is very an ideal one. Did you also discuss about what if we talk about inclusivity, then we also talk about the exclusivity. So how did you discuss about the situation that in contrast with the inclusivity that you also discussed, and about the challenges that you face in terms of building the inclusivity in the society. Thank you.
You switched me off again. There were several dimensions of this exclusivity versus inclusivity division there. There is a long discussion was held about the terms of religious exclusivity, which is close to all religions, because we all like to be right 100%. But instead of having that as our principle, the picture of the co-pilgrims, of the co-seekers, of all the different ideas that are there, that are trying to understand and make sense of this world and of the divine, is a lot more sustainable in respect of inclusivity here. So to be religiously inclusive is a very important subject here, because the absolute truth is very difficult to be inclusive in that respect. So we've had that. We've also had the inclusivity of non-believers within the family of the faiths. That is also important. Yeah? It's free for everybody to be a non-believer. And that's fine. Yeah? And that's not the most important bit. The most important bit about being inclusive and being relevant for a positive society are your actions and are your values that don't necessarily have to be religiously grounded. So that is also a part of what's coming up in Fratelli Tutti. An additional point of inclusivity is the understanding of how do we think about gender? How do we hold people accountable for the marginalizations that they exert over another gender? That has been discussed as well. And I think that is something that is not featured as prominently in Fratelli Tutti as it should be. But this is just my personal opinion, where I would say is a bit of a gap there, and where more could come. But at the end of the day, we must not forget that this is done by a very old and traditional religion at the end of the day. So they are normally not the ones that are pushing this one the furthest and the fastest. So for that context, Fratelli Tutti gives already a lot of hints on how to overcome the inequality between the genders in the world. Vivian, did I answer your question sufficiently?
Yeah, thank you. But what about the challenges, particularly in the context of Africa, in building the inclusivity society, yeah? Inclusive society?
In the context of Africa, I would say that the concept of being inclusive of all the ethnicities that are there was the most relevant point that was discussed. And this is specifically important in the Kenyan context with upcoming elections that have the potential to be severely violent. This is then, again, this is a inclusivity discussion with a very Kenyan flavor to it that cannot be 100% scaled up. But you need to look at the specific situations that are there on the ground and find a way to be as inclusive as possible. So that's where we came in with this. Traditions are not necessarily the ones that are inclusive, but they can be bridged without forgetting about the traditions, but you can bridge these traditional gaps, traditional exclusivities here.
Let us now take a question before we go. We pass on to Gerald from our viewers. We take a question from Sister Marcy Jeprotich, who is a student in the Institute of Islamic Studies at Tangaza University College. Hudai, can you read the question of Sister Marcy Jeprotich?
Sister Marcy asks, due to this bad governance, how can they be sensitized to allow the aspect of fraternity and justice to flow right from their positions to the citizens?
Anybody can answer that question. It is on governance. Or maybe can we give Dr. Reginald to answer the question on governance?
Yes, I think what Sister wants to see is responsible leadership at the top and how it responds to common problems people face. I think we have this habit of people campaigning to take position of leadership, but when they're in office, they don't respond to needs of their own people. So how do we transform these governors or leaders who hold positions of power to understand the meaning of Fratelli Tutti and put it into practice? For example, I think Indonesia, you raise a very good point when you are talking about the 3 strategies, the self strategy, organization strategy, networking strategy. And in networking strategy, you have this model you have tried to bring to us, that even Matthew's trying to answer to us, that when I'm an insider, I don't accept the outsiders. I always think the people who are outside the circle as the enemy or my enemies or my people who are coming to consume what we have. That fear of the outside. But you in Indonesia have found a model of bringing the outside to link with inside, then the inside to link with the outside. So if I'm a leader, I need to sensitize my people to accept everybody irrespective of their faith, background, ethnicity, color, where they come from. Thank you.
But I think what is the difficult bit is here, how do we hold our leaders accountable? And this is a systematic question, and that is extremely complicated in a system like in Kenya. It might be easier possible in other systems, but how do we hold our leaders accountable to be inclusive and to be acting in the light of something like Fratelli Tutti? And I think this is a question that we cannot answer at this point, but that needs to be done. And that needs to be, this accountability needs to be forced by the people.
So we get a comment from Gerald, and then we'll come back to Nairobi, and we'll have General Bashir and then Father Abraham.
My question has to do with Sharia.
Maybe let's go first to Gerald. Maybe before Sharia, we continue with the government and governance, and then we'll come back to you. Yes, General Bashir.
Yeah, I think Gerald's point is valid because in Kenya we have come a long way. Since we gained independence in 1963, we have had various changes to our system of governance. We started with a federal system, then we broke that down. We went to a unitary system. We changed our constitution. It did work. In 2010, we got a new constitution. And although we remained a unitary state, but with 48 governments, the national government and 47 county governments. So we introduced devolution in a different way, other than the federal system. We remained unitary, but devolved. And the reason for all this was because of bad governance. And Kenyans went through a lot to change their constitution until in 2010, they inaugurated a new one. And that new constitution provides for avenues to address issues regarding bad governance. And the first and most important of those, the 5-year cycle, we go through an election. So if you are not satisfied with, in theory, that is, in theory, if you are not satisfied with the leadership, then you have an opportunity to change that. The other thing that was introduced was the recall clause. It's a long process, it's a tedious process, but you can recall your representatives. Okay, and in that way you can change the situation that you're in. There are other issues of poor governance, like poverty, lack of education, lack of shelter. All these have to be addressed through the devolved system that was introduced in 2010. But it is taking a long time. So far, we've done 10 years of devolution, and it has proven a challenge, but it's a challenge that we hope with time can be surmounted. Thank you.
Yes, Father Abraham.
I would like to start with the recommendation of one of the speakers, Dr. Suzanne, today concerning good governance. She recommended, after I read this document, Fratelli, Tutti, I would give to each official in the government as a tool to be inclusive. She was inclusive, or at least for good governance as an instrument, she was saying. And I think she spoke well from the point of Kenya, but I was going back thinking how we can help the governments to improve their way of dealing with the people, in particular inclusivity. I think Tangaza has started long ago how to contribute to this inclusivity and other good governance. We have professors who have tradition of working with the governors, like Dr. Nadugala, maybe Father Innocent as well, sometimes, I do not know. But also Father Karamasa and Father Francesco, they have been always in touch. Tangaza is in touch to help them to be more inclusive. And this is a call, wherever we may be, as one of helping the governments is to be in touch with the critically situational analyzing universities. So that I think one of the recommendations which we received from Dr. Suzanne. Thank you.
Thank you very much on the issue of governance. Then we can go now to Gerald on the issue of Sharia.
I'm wondering if good governance ties in with Sharia, because one of the problems is there's various types of Sharia in different parts of the Islamic world. For example, in Afghanistan, we have this problem of women fearing the governance that's coming to Afghanistan. So would this be a role for our group to look at Sharia in the light of Fratelli Tutti, and also to develop certain principles of human rights for women, no matter what version of Sharia you may have, that would basically give us an opportunity to implement a governance for women that would provide equality and opportunities for education, which might run in conflict with certain versions of Sharia. I've just asked that question.
Yes, I can answer to that. Yes, I think the understanding and the development of the different Sharia traditions that are there already will need to be supported. I think the connotation of Sharia is extremely negative. That's the first point. The second point is that it is being seen as a uniform body of law, which it is not. And the third point, even within the Islamic tradition, is that not all parts of the Sharia are universal. So there are, and this leaves a lot of room for national, local, but also international initiatives to come up with, how do you say that? With time and with time-sensitive and inclusive versions of Sharia law. We have these initiatives, for example, in Nigeria. I've been working with some of those that are talking about Sharia intelligence. That's what they call in their courses. So they are going back beyond the classical texts of Sharia, back further down into the Hadith, taking out the stuff that is relevant for this day and age, and translating it into a Sharia law that is complementary, at least, to the current understanding of human rights. So there are these initiatives, and they can be supported. On the other hand, there are extremely problematic cultural notions of Sharia, as we can see it now in Afghanistan, for example, very prominently. These are being denounced, for example, by Islamic scholars as well. So we have voices in many Muslim countries that are denouncing the understanding of the Taliban Sharia laws, because they also feel that they are being threatened by these backward ideas that they are promoting. Would anyone?
Here in Kenya, we have Umma University, which has a degree program in Sharia law, and I think through education, it can help students to understand the meaning of Sharia and how to interpret it. I hope they also link it with governance and so on. Here in Tangaza, we have is just a unit on Islamic law, just to help the Christians who come into our program of interreligious dialogue and Islamic studies to understand what Sharia is, because there are all lot of prejudices and misunderstanding of what Sharia law is. So what we try to help the student to understand what Sharia law means. So I give also to General Bashir just to make a comment.
Thank you, Padre. First of all, I think the most important thing to understand is that the religion of Islam is in itself transformative. And it's one of the biggest transforming factors that humanity has ever witnessed. And Sharia is a guide. It is a guidance. It guides because Islam is a way of life. And it explains explicitly how Muslims are expected to live. Of course, it is built on Abrahamic traditions. So it goes back many, many centuries before the coming even of Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it addresses the future of humanity after the message of the Prophet has been delivered. So you cannot say that it is extinct. It is not. It is live. It is current. And the only problem is some people tend to interpret it in very draconian ways. And that is the issue that we should be discussing. Tangaza University in itself has an institute of social transformation. And it has opened its mind to many approaches to transformation. And that's why it has had a number of Islamic students on its campus. But that does not mean that because they are Muslim and they're in a Christian environment, then they should discard their Islamic traditions, Islamic culture. No. Islam teaches very clearly how to coexist with other civilizations. It has had a system of relations because Christianity was already there, Zoroastrianism was there, Hinduism was there, and the Quran clearly states that it was revealed, the Quran itself was revealed to explain the gray areas that have existed in human civilizations before. So it is supposed to be an improvement, not a backtracking. And if interpreted correctly, then you will find that it's quite a useful way to live. Thank you.
So good. We have had a quite enriching discussion, and at the same time pointing out to certain aspects which we did not maybe develop because we did not have much time, or which we could develop in our future engagement together. So mine is just to thank all the hubs, for this wonderful time of discussion and so on. So we are almost ready to pass now to the next session, which will be the global closing with the address of religious leaders. So I would like to ask Hudai, how do we go about it? Do we first come out of this Zoom and then we connect now to the link?
And the other link, we are going to connect to the other link that I have sent. And now we can finish this streaming, the broadcast, and our followers on YouTube. You can follow our channel. The closing ceremony is there as well.
That is a question, yeah. Gerard?
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much. So we get out of this Zoom session and then we prepare ourselves for the now the closing session of this global conference on Fratelli Tutti. Thank you very much for your participation.